This video is brought to you by Nebula. Last week, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak went to the House of Commons to try and get his fellow MPs to back his Windsor Framework deal. For previous Prime Ministers, this would be a perilous task. Theresa May was virtually forced out of office for failing in her 3 attempts to get her Brexit deal through Parliament. Equally, Johnson struggled to get his deal through, having to resort to tactics such as unlawfully proroguing Parliament in order to get the deal through. Ultimately, it seems that Rishi Sunak may have just succeeded where his predecessors failed in getting his Brexit agreement through a previously hostile Parliament. With this in mind, let's have a look at whether Sunak has indeed beaten the Brexiteers. Before getting down into this, it's worth explaining what Sunak's Windsor Framework actually is. In essence, this new agreement aims at fixing some of the problems that existed as part of the previous Brexit deal, agreed under Prime Minister Boris Johnson. As part of this deal, the UK signed the Northern Ireland Protocol. In order to keep goods moving between Northern Ireland, part of the UK and now outside the EU, and the Republic of Ireland, part of the EU single market, a de facto border was created in the Irish Sea. This meant that goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland required regulatory and customs checks. This frustrated some members of the Conservative Party, who saw the border in the Irish Sea as a violation of the party's commitment to Irish unionism, and members of the DUP. Sunak's new Windsor Framework addressed this issue by creating so-called red and green lanes. Anything destined to go to Northern Ireland will do so by going through its green lane. As such, the goods will be subjected to far fewer checks. Anything that could go through Northern Ireland and into the Republic of Ireland goes through its red route, which includes more checks. Sunak's thinking here is that as there are now fewer checks for any goods destined for Northern Ireland, it weakens the argument made by some on the backbenches, including the DUP, that there's a de facto border in the Irish Sea. Anyway, despite Sunak's argument, there was still opposition by Brexiteers backbenchers. Among the highest profile dissenters was the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson himself. In a statement before the vote, he explained that the proposed arrangements would mean that either Northern Ireland remained captured by the EU legal order and was increasingly divergent from the rest of the UK, or they would mean that the whole of the UK was unable to properly diverge and take advantage of Brexit. That is not acceptable. In essence, Johnson is criticising a new system in the Windsor Framework designed to resolve disputes between the UK and the EU. This system creates something called the Stormont Break, which in essence is a veto against rules being amended or replaced by the EU. As part of this, the European Court of Justice, or ECJ, could be asked to arbitrate on issues where EU law may have been broken. Now, Johnson and other Brexiteers are criticising the fact that the ECJ still has some influence in Northern Ireland. As we mentioned in the intro, former Prime Ministers have had tough times getting Brexit deals through Parliament, and it was expected that Sunak would face similar opposition last week, especially following Johnson's intervention. Now, while a number of MPs alongside Johnson voted against the deal, including high-profile figures such as Liz Truss and Ian Duncan Smith, only 22 Tories in total voted against Sunak. And as Labour backed the agreement, it sailed through Parliament. Most significantly, though, was Steve Baker's criticism of Boris Johnson's decision to vote against the bill.
He can be remembered for the great acts of statecraft that he achieved, or he can risk looking like a pound-shop Nigel Farage, and I hope he chooses to be remembered as a statesman.
Now, this is significant because Baker was one of the chairs of the European Research Group, or ERG. This is a parliamentary grouping of backbench Eurosceptic Tory MPs who caused trouble for any Prime Minister that presented any deal with the European Union that they thought was too soft. They were instrumental in voting down Theresa May's Brexit deal, and as such, their approval has been seen as vital in any Prime Minister's success at negotiating any Brexit deals. They backed Boris Johnson's deal, and clearly Johnson was hoping they'd join him in trying to bring Sunak's down. But, well, they just didn't. And now that the issue surrounding the border in Northern Ireland appears to be resolved, the government will be happy that they can claim that Brexit is finally done. This is only helped by the fact that the ERG's WhatsApp group appears to have been deleted by none other than Steve Baker himself. Now, he did admit that the current officers in the ERG may recreate the chat, but its deletion signals the weakened appetite in the group for rebellion. All of this seems to bode well for Prime Minister Sunak, who can now claim that he was the Prime Minister to finally get Brexit done. This means that Sunak can, first, try and claim the Brexit issue for the Conservatives at the next election. Given how far behind the Conservatives have been in the polls, having an issue that they can definitively point to and say, "We succeeded at this," could really help them win over swing voters, especially those that are fed up hearing about Brexit. Second, this also means that he can claim victory against his predecessor. Having stood on a platform of getting Brexit done, Johnson might have seemed like Mr. Brexit himself. However, leaving office without fully resolving the Northern Ireland issue will certainly not have helped his legacy, and this is something he was evidently quite bitter about. The fact that he was trying to cause problems on the backbenches for Sunak demonstrates that he doesn't see this battle as over. Johnson was clearly hoping that he could cause a big enough fuss over Sunak's Brexit plans to either block them or start questioning whether they're right for the country. In either case, he was hoping that MPs would agree that his solution to the problem of Northern Ireland was better. This just didn't happen, and it seems that it was simply another win for Sunak in the quiet war between the former Prime Minister and the current Prime Minister, a war that's been ongoing ever since Sunak fired the starter pistol on a leadership contest by resigning as Chancellor last year. Ultimately, it seems that Sunak may have sorted out one of the final sticking points with the UK's Brexit deal, and may have finally silenced Johnson and other Brexiteers in the process. If that's not enough TLDR for one day, then you ought to check out our series This Week in Parliament, which has just made a magnificent return. That's not a quote or something, it's just a thing I'm saying. This Week in Parliament is the show where we run down exactly what happened in Parliament in the preceding week, breaking down the debates, laws and bills which otherwise you'd totally miss, and explaining what really happens in Britain's seat of power when you brush aside all the shouting and arm waving. New episodes come out every week, only on Nebula. But that's not all. There's also the extended version of the daily briefing every single weekday, a bunch of exclusive explainer videos, some silly fun content, and all of our videos totally ad-free. It's not just TLDR either. We're joined by a bunch of your favourite creators, from Wendover and Real Life Law to Johnny Harris. Which means there's a whole load of exclusive videos, early access to loads of creators, and all the ad-free viewing you can handle. Signing up using our link in the description gets you access for just $2.50 a month, and is the absolute best way to support the channel. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on Nebula.